Hello, welcome to Smash Hit Sports. This is the vacation episode. Nick and I both on vacation prior to the Final Four. A long basketball season is coming to a close, and boy, is it closing in an outstanding fashion. I love this Final Four. I am super excited for these games. But Nick, what are your thoughts on the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, everything that has led up to where we are now in this beautiful sport of college hoops?
Yeah, I mean, again, beautiful sport, best sport probably in the world, best time of the year, really. I know it's April now, but this is still March, and I'm gonna remember this tournament forever and ever because Clemson made the Elite Eight. Something that I never would have dreamed could happen happened. So I'll hold this tournament in really high regard. NC State, honestly, is probably one of the crazier stories in March Madness history. They were, a free throw being made by Isaac McNeely away from, just being eliminated and a complete afterthought. And now they're in the Final Four. That shit does not happen often. Like, all the 11 seeds that have made it, they haven't had that much chaos. So it's crazy. I thought the Sweet 16 games, Alabama, UNC, was a fantastic game. Illinois, Iowa State, I feel like lived up to the hype to an extent. We had so many great matchups, so many great teams. The only thing really missing is the lack of internal chaos, like in game, where you have, a team, up 3, turn it over. Oh my God, like game tying 3, but then they make a 3, and then the other team makes it and 1. Just all within like the last 30 seconds of the game. We didn't see anything that crazy, but March Madness is never going to be bad. So I've just been enthralled by this tournament as a whole. And of course, UConn's dominating the entire thing. So we'll see, because if they end up losing, it'll be one of the bigger upsets ever, it seems.
Yeah, this UConn team is an absolute wagon. Like I the first half of their game against Illinois, I was like, shit, like I feel pretty good. I had Illinois, going to the Final Four out of that region. I felt solid. And I was like, okay, like Illinois can win this game. And then UConn went on one of the greatest runs I think I've ever seen any basketball team go on at any level ever. Like 30-0 run is absolutely insane. I know Kevin Miyakawa does like the kill shot statistic, which is runs of 10 or more points. Like,
yeah, one of those is huge. 3 in a row.
Those, your odds of winning that game are like 85%. A 20-point run is almost like 100% guaranteed victory. I don't even know if there are any other instances of a 30-point run like that, and especially not in an Elite Eight tournament game. Legitimately insane. This UConn team, what they're doing is so unbelievable. Donovan Clingan, it looks like a National Player of the Year. Like, if I had to vote for the most outstanding player in the tournament, I think it would be between him and Zach Edey, which Zach Edey is still doing Zach Edey things. But it's this UConn team.
No, I know. That'd be really tough to vote between those two. Because if they gave the average fan a vote, the average fan is like, oh, fuck Zach Edey. Like, I hate how he plays. But if you're given the votes and you're projecting out, like, what do you think, the voters are going to do? I almost feel like it kind of has to be Edey, right? 40-16 against Tennessee. That's insane. That's going to be talked about forever.
In a game,
that's an insane stat.
In a game where Purdue controlled that, like they controlled the pace. Dalton Connect was playing well. He had 37.
Yep.
And still Edey, inevitable. He's relentless. Like, I understand the like, oh yeah, well, if he was 6'6", he wouldn't be this good. Yeah, but he's not. He's 7'4" and he's 300 pounds. Pretty hard to guard. Like, it's what he's doing is really, really phenomenal. He's really great at his job. They don't ask him to do. I saw somebody, I ranked, my top college basketball players of the year. Somebody in my but like, look at what all Dalton Connect can do compared to Edey. And I'm like, I get that. I get it. But they don't ask Zach Edey to shoot 3.
It's a completely different thing. It's like, what if Shaq on the prime Lakers was 6'6", right?
Yeah.
Is Shaquille O'Neal winning MVPs and Like, no. And you say he keeps his 40% free throw shooting, so he cannot shoot for shit. All he can do is bully people in the post. If he's 6'6", Shaquille O'Neal's going to the G League, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's honestly impressive that Zach Edey is a similar type of player to what we saw in the early 2000s from big men, yet he's actually like a 75, 80% free throw shooter. Like
Yeah.
he nails his free throws, and he's great at drawing a foul. He's amazing. He's going to get drafted in the first round. That's a guarantee, in my opinion.
It's insane to me that, like, if Zach Edey shot 70% from the free throw line, people would be like, oh yeah, like he's good, but like he's not, the refs aren't that big of a deal. It is what it is. It's because he's such a terrific free throw shooter that people are so worked up about his fouls. Because otherwise, it'd just be another big guy. Like, we've seen players like him before who can dominate defensively and then, like,
it's hard to defend that, right? He's 7'4" and he's got a bag. He knows exactly how to get to his spot. And you're completely right that he could shoot 16 free throws, which is a lot for someone, but like for Edey, it's like, kind of almost standard. If he makes 8 of those free throws, we might be looking at like 25 points, 12 rebounds. It's like, what a great game from Edey. But no, he makes 14 of those free throws, and it's a 30-point double-double dominant performance, just because of the fact that he's a good free throw shooter, which should actually make you view him in a higher regard. So yes, I hate the Edey hate. I don't like that he gets as much hate as he does. It bothers me. But
I agree. Moving on to the other teams, because we talked UConn and Purdue, and it does seem like, obviously, it's the tournament. Anything can happen.
I would love to see that matchup. Just a meeting of the Godzilla versus Kong, right?
Yeah. The thing about these these are some lopsided Final Four lines. Alabama, I believe, is an 11-point dog against UConn, which is insane.
I got it in
a Final Four team. This Alabama has scored 100-plus points more than any other team in the country, and they're an 11-point dog on a neutral site in the Final Four. And then you have NC State, who is a 9-point dog against Purdue, at least when the lines opened. These two teams NC State's run is unbelievable. Do you truly think that they have a shot against Purdue? Because
I do.
I have a lot of concern.
I absolutely do. This is why week in, week out, people are saying, God, like NC State is great, but they're just less talented than this team they're going against. So they won't. And at this point, I genuinely think that Purdue and NC State, this might sound crazy, they might be equal in talent. And honestly, NC State might have more talent. They might be the more talented team. When you have Edey, that's going to be really hard. The foul trouble, DJ Burns might just kind of not be able to perform to the level that he's been performing at. But we can't deny it any further, because it, like I said against Marquette, like Marquette's just too fast. Like, they're just a better team. Marquette looked way worse. They almost looked like the roles were reversed. Duke in the second half just looked too soft. Like NC State, DJ Horn, I think, is probably the best scorer in that game. DJ Burns, what he's doing, the confidence you got to be feeling. Diarra, Casey Marcel, when he gets hot, is amazing. I just think that this NC State team is so in rhythm, they're clicking, that a 9-point spread, I love NC State. I think that people are just doubting them, and until they start understanding that the 11 seed doesn't define them and that they're actually playing like probably a top 3 seed in the tournament, then, people will probably just keep picking Purdue, and then NC State's going to battle. They're going to feel disrespected like they have all tournament, and they could win that game. I truly believe it.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting with NC State's how they're going to defend Edey. Do they leave Burns on him? Do they switch through? Because like Diarra is 6'10", Middlebrooks has given NC State some good minutes to them. So like I could see them kind of platooning guarding Zach Edey so you don't get a guy in foul trouble early, because that is my biggest concern is if you have a guy like DJ Burns who's so dynamic for you offensively, if he gets in a situation where he gets 2 or 3 fouls early, that could put you in a real tight spot offensively.
You want DJ Burns in for offense. And if he picked up 3 early fouls, that's pretty devastating. I completely agree.
Yeah. But no, I agree that DJ Horne's probably the best scorer in this game. Like, he's a dynamic player. Braden
the other
Smith.
Thing,
oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So, like, you've seen 6 11 seeds play in the Final Four, which is crazy because trivia fact for you, there's only one 10 seed to ever make the Final Four, which is just doesn't add up mathematically because this is now the 7th 11 seed. But none of them have advanced to the championship game. Right, like Loyola Chicago, like it feels like every year it's inched closer until UCLA 3 years ago was, Jalen Suggs half-court buzzer beater away from maybe doing it. So I think that the more and more, diverse the talent is in college basketball, which we're seeing with the transfer portal, everything, it's just getting closer and closer to the unthinkable being able to happen where we've seen 16 seeds win. I think we can see an 11 seed win a tournament even. Like, they are 2 games away. Now, I don't think they could beat UConn. I will stand firm on that UConn is too good. And if anyone, like, UConn could lose to Alabama, but UConn NC State would not be a very fun final. But I genuinely think NC State is good enough to win this game against Purdue. And I think people are just kind of blind and like, well, they're an 11 seed. They're not going to make the final because no one's ever done it. Like, things are changing.
So, from a narrative standpoint, everybody talks about Purdue being choke artists, typical Purdue, like losing early in the tournament. Matt Painter has finally gotten the monkey off of his back, getting his team to a Final Four. However, am I wrong in saying that this season would still probably be a little disappointing if Purdue lost to an 11 seed in the Final Four and did not make it to the championship game?
I mean, yeah. I don't think it'll be a little bit disappointing, but Purdue having not made a Final Four since like the 80s or whatever.
Literally 1980.
Right. So that alone, I feel like now you can go another 20 years of kind of having like bad performances. You're like, yeah, but we don't have this massive Final Four drought, right? If in 7 years they don't make it back, it's like, well, they were in the Final Four. So I don't think from a historical standpoint, this season has already kind of accomplished a very important thing for Purdue, which is just kind of getting that monkey off their back. Mm-hmm. But it'll feel like a massive missed opportunity if you lose to NC State, which I think the pressure is going to be there, right? And we've said it all year that Purdue, they play really damn well against the teams that are really, really, good, that like Matt Painter can kind of push his own narrative where it's like, we're playing a Tennessee team, that we were ranked behind at blah, blah, blah at some point, or, we beat them. And it helps because they played Gonzaga and Tennessee as the 2 hardest teams they've played, and they beat them already this year. Now they're playing NC State. Who knows what's going to go through their head, but we could see a scenario where that game's close, NC State's hanging around, and Purdue just can't pull away, and they start to get in their own heads a little bit. We will see, but I absolutely think it's possible. I like it. I like it maybe to happen. I don't want to call my shot, but we'll see.
That would be an unbelievable upset and an all-time story in terms of college basketball. Going to the other side, Alabama. This Nate Oates team has been it's kind of been the same story for Nate Oates every year at Alabama. This team can shoot, they can score. Can they defend? Can they defend consistently? And normally they've had a game where they shoot themselves out of the tournament. And even when they were the number 1 overall seed, like they had a game, they didn't shoot well, they were out of the tournament. Even against a Clemson team where like they didn't put on their best shooting performance, Alabama in
the second half.
Well, fair, but they still managed to get the job done against what I thought was a really good Clemson team, and like they fought their ass off. Does this Alabama team with Mark Sears have a shot at toppling UConn? Because everywhere I look across the board, it's like Sears is phenomenal, but UConn has Tristan Newton. Like it's UConn's just a menace. A
They
menace
are.
to the
They're a
ball.
machine. UConn's a well-oiled machine. But this is what I have to say about Alabama. There aren't a lot of teams in college basketball that run their offense the way that Nate Oates runs his offense at Alabama, and he did it at Buffalo as well. But it is basically full-blown NBA offense. You will never see Alabama shoot a mid-range shot. It doesn't exist. It's Nate Oates is probably ingraining that in his players' heads. That's the worst shot in college basketball, which is fascinating because you see some of these other teams just pulling from 20 feet, like foot on the line twos, and it's like, oh, that's awful. Alabama, it's layup or three. If you have to force a three or force a layup, fine. You're not taking anything else. And I think that eventually Alabama just shoots so much. You saw it against Clemson, where they started kind of cold. They were missing threes, and the buddies I was watching with, all my former Clemson roommates, they were saying, like, this Alabama team, they're not going to keep missing. Like Baylor, they kept missing their threes. Arizona, they kept missing their threes. This Alabama team, they're going to shoot so much, they're not going to keep missing. And that's exactly what happened. In the second half, Mark Sears was 7 for 8 from three. That's insane. You had, I don't even know the guy in the corner's name, who, Richardson or something. I was not familiar with his game. He was like 5 for 8. Stevenson. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. You have Aaron Estrada, you have Grant Nelson, you have Rylan Griffin, all of whom can just get hot. And when you run an offense like that, where it's like drive and kick, like, I think it's going to work against UConn. I just don't think Alabama is going to be able to stop UConn. So it should be a fun game.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not expecting by any means, UConn to below Alabama. I would be more shocked than if you were shot in the head right now. I'd be more shocked if UConn won by 20 plus. I'm willing to guarantee it does not happen.
Yeah,
Alabama's that good.
I think the biggest X factor in this game is going to be Grant Nelson. I mean, he has been awesome the last couple of games of the tournament. Looked the polished player that I thought he was going to be early in the season. He wasn't quite there to start. I think it took him a little bit to mesh with this Alabama team, but coming in from North Dakota State, he was a stud, and he absolutely looked the part their last couple of tournament games. I'm excited to see what he can do because he is a little dynamic. I don't know who they're going to put on him because I'm assuming you don't have Klingon guard Nelson because he does do so much around the perimeter.
Well, all of Alabama's players do. Like, Klingon's going to have to play perimeter D. He's going to have to unless they run a zone.
I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. I just don't if you told me that Grant Nelson ended up with 25 and 12 with 3 blocks, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he has that kind of a game in him. But the question is that big enough from him in order to propel this Alabama team to a win? That I don't know.
There's that, and there's the question: is he going to stay out of foul trouble? Because defensively, he was in foul trouble against Clemson. He's been in foul trouble in a bunch of games I've watched this year. And UConn's a team that, just hard to defend. Like, he might be switched onto Klingon. His assignment might be Klingon in general. He might just pick up 3 early fouls, and just can't get himself to compete in that game, which would be disappointing, but we'll see. There's a world where UConn wins this game easily. Again, I do not think it'll ever be 20 plus points, but there's a world, they can get some guys into foul trouble where they kind of win. It's hovering around 10 to 12 points for most of the second half, that type of thing. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, and I am sort of expecting a UConn win, but I'm expecting it to be UConn's up 6 with a minute and a half or 2.5 minutes left, Alabama ball, and we're kind of whoa, anything could happen here. Anything could happen. That's kind of my prediction. So,
yep. Speaking of predictions, do we want to do that now, or do we want to talk about the best games of the tournament and then save our predictions for the end?
We already kind of we touched on it. Let's just rip our predictions. It's not that deep, right? We got 2 games. I think it's going to be UConn. I'll go out on a limb and I'll say NC State. I think UConn over NC State in the final.
Damn.
I'll go ahead and say that. We can clip it if it happens. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely see a world where it's possible. Absolutely do.
Yeah, I don't want to pick UConn. They seem as inevitable as any team has ever seemed at this point in the tournament, but I'm going to go with Purdue over UConn.
Mm-hmm.
I just Zach Edey has been so much fun to watch, and I think it would be a storybook ending on a two-time National Player of the Year to bring a championship banner to a team that has never seen one, to a Purdue team that has always been the little brother to IU in their state, and say, any argument that has ever happened between a Purdue and an IU fan ends up with an IU fan just pointing up to the rafters at their banners. And that's how every conversation has ever gone. And for this Purdue team to be able to go in and win a national title with a two-time National Player of the Year, I think that it would, and a bunch of Indiana kids on that team, I think it would just be absolutely storybook. I think it would be sickening to a lot of Hoosiers fans. And
True.
it's just so hard to go back to back. It's so hard to go back to back. We
Yeah.
haven't seen it since Florida. And don't get me wrong, if any team can do it, it is this UConn team. But I'm gonna ride with the Boilermakers. So give me Purdue over UConn in the national title.
Yeah, and you know what? I do think that if Purdue does beat NC State, I kind of do like that. I'll be rooting for that. This is like Purdue's final test, right? Like they're playing a team they weren't prepared to play. They weren't thinking about NC State in the Final Four at all.
Yeah.
And now they have to play them. And they can watch all the film they want. This NC State team is just improving by the day. And they're matching by the day.
The film of NC State 3 weeks ago is not the same film that, they're putting on now. So it's crazy how polished they've looked over the last couple of games. But that being said, on Instagram, you put up a best games of the year, best games of the tournament, and then compared that to the best games of the last decade. How do you think this year did in terms of just the games themselves? Because there are a lot of games that immediately stick out in my mind. The Furman, Virginia upset was unbelievable. Obviously, you had Villanova, North Carolina might be the greatest basketball game ever played. But where do you rank these games this year?
So it's basically, and I love this list. I love it. It's, your top 50. You can make it like a top 68 if you want to do like a bracket version. But just of the past decade. So we are adding the 2024 games, taking out the 2014 games. 2014 was a phenomenal tournament. You had Kentucky, that run as an 8 seed where they played Wichita State in one of the best games I've ever seen. The Harrison buzzer beaters against Michigan, Wisconsin. You had the Louisville game. 2014 had it all. And you take them out, and it's like, okay, now we have a bunch of open spots. Where are we putting these 2024 games? Because when you look back at it, it's like, did we have a game that felt as good as Kentucky-Wichita State? I don't think so, in my opinion. Did we have a game that had a similar finish to Kentucky-Wisconsin where, it's for a spot to the Final Four, game winner, cold-blooded 30-foot three after doing it the week before? I don't know if we had that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hard because when you look at this list, you realize how many insane games there are in March Madness. So you turn a blind eye to that. You look at 2024, you say, this was a great tournament. We had Colorado, Florida. We had Auburn, Yale, Kentucky, Oakland. Some crazy upsets, some great games. But then you're looking at Villanova, North Carolina, Florida, Wisconsin, 2017 with the Chris Chiozza push shot at the buzzer in overtime. Texas A&M, Northern Iowa, down 11 with seconds left, and you win that game.
Massive comeback.
Virginia, Purdue, buzzer beater.
Yep.
Purdue, Tennessee, Ryan Klein.
Purdue,
that's number 2 for me, right? You have Gonzaga, UCLA, buzzer beater. North Carolina, Kentucky, Luke May, Malik Monk, both hit the craziest shots that I've ever seen. North Carolina, Duke, Final Four just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Felt like the best college basketball game in history, and it's not even top 5. Virginia, Texas Tech. It's Wisconsin beating undefeated Kentucky. All of this is just the peak of college basketball that I don't know if we had this year. Even though we had some fantastic games like Oregon Creighton double overtime.
Yeah.
I'll rewatch that game. It deserves a spot on the top 50, but nothing. It doesn't deserve a spot over, you know, Nevada, Cincinnati, Nevada coming back.
Oh yeah.
Right. Georgia State, Baylor with the RJ Hunter shot.
Yep.
Um,
And his dad
like,
falling off of the
yeah, like
stoop
these
that he
things
had.
that will be remembered forever by everyone that watched it. I don't know if we had that game this year. At least not yet. I don't know what your thoughts are, but
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We had a lot of games that like they ended up being great games. Like the Kentucky Oakland was a phenomenal game, but there was never like a singular moment that was because I feel like there are two ways to remember games. There are really great games, and then there are really great moments within games. And I feel like we didn't have a lot of those moments this year. Like Houston, Texas A&M, phenomenal game, came back, pushed it to overtime, but then like Houston kind of ran away with that a little bit and won that game pretty handedly. Yeah, like Oakland, Kentucky, like that was a great game, the whole game, but it wasn't sort of like any comeback, and there wasn't like a big shot at the end. Same with Creighton, Oregon going into double OT. Like it's not like they made some sort of outstanding play to go into double overtime or the first overtime, right? So
right,
I don't
like
think we
that's
had
like
any of those
Houston
huge
A&M. I think would
moments
be the highest on the list because you
because of the
had that
comeback late.
the
Yeah.
buzzer beater to force overtime against a 1 seed, like
Yes.
unbelievable. But like you said, overtime wasn't necessarily electric. A lot of the Houston guys fouled out. It wasn't like the prettiest basketball game. Like Wade Taylor was 5 for 30.
Yeah.
If we saw a finish like that where it's like a shot to force it into overtime, if we saw that in like Kentucky versus Oakland, where you had just shooters that couldn't miss, if that game went into overtime and then Oakland ends up winning on something crazy, then yes, that game automatically like probably enters the top 15, maybe top 10, because that's March Madness. But we kind of were just lacking ever so slightly in some of these areas that would make it all-time legacy without a doubt. Will be remembered for the next decade easy. So I think all these games sort of fall into like FDU versus Purdue territory. Um, remember the Florida Virginia Tech game 2021? It was the first game of the tournament, went into overtime.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's not remembered that well, but it was a great game and it deserves a spot on this list, but it's kind of like that's where I'm throwing in Houston A&M, Kentucky, Oakland, Creighton, maybe Alabama, UNC. Some of these games that just they weren't as good. And it's crazy though, because if you look at the top 25, there's a game from every single tournament in the top 25 besides 2024.
Yeah.
And I don't expect that to change even with time. The nostalgia factor, I still don't think it's going to change anything. So it's just
Yep.
disappointing in that sense, but that's really all. And it's still March Madness. So
Yep. Well, and we got 3 more games left.
we do.
Like the greatest game that I can read is the North Carolina Villanova. Like
Yeah, you're damn right about that.
The shot that ended that game, and even the shot beforehand, that the double clutch that
Marcus
people don't
Page. Yep.
Marcus Page that people don't necessarily remember because of Villanova shot at the end, Chris Jenkins. But yeah, I mean, we have 3 games left. I'm super pumped for these 3 games. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. We will likely, for those of you listening, the national championships on Monday. My assumption is that we'll try to record Tuesday and then get that episode out to you as soon as we possibly can. I know this week's episode is a little delayed, mainly because I got drunk and forgot on vacation. But hey, that's vacation. So, Nick, anything else that we want to bring to the people before we tie a bow on this one? I know it's a shorter episode, but we
yeah, definitely a shorter episode. Again, this is the vacation episode. The only thing I can think of, Cody, is that we're previewing the Final Four, and it's obviously hard to project outward and preview the national championship game before we know what it is.
Yep.
But we won't be able to really get out a preview episode for you guys. It'll just kind of be a reaction. So if you wanted to kind of really quickly just touch on like your predictions, Purdue, UConn, like how does Purdue win that game in your opinion, kind of thing, and maybe because obviously if I have UConn, NC State, I don't know if I have to explain it that much.
Mhm.
That spread would be hilarious. UConn's just too talented on my end, but I would be interested in, coming from an Indiana guy, what is the method? Because you've watched every UConn game,
Yeah.
that like as good as Purdue is, it's I don't know if you can run that slow kind of feed Edie offense. I don't know if that's going to work if they play.
Yeah, the issue that I have concerns with is pacing in this game because UConn never at any point in any UConn game played all year have they not been in control of the pace. Even against tougher opponents, even in conference play, they controlled the pace in damn near every game that they played in. The biggest one that I could think of where they kind of fell apart was in
The
that
Creighton.
Seton Hall matchup and then Creighton. But like the Seton Hall matchup, everything just fell out of sorts there. But I don't think Purdue is going to be able to sit there and methodically punch UConn in the mouth. They're
They
going
won't.
to have to play a little bit faster. I expect if Purdue wins this game, I expect us to be telling the story of Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith and Gillis, like
Lance
playing
Jones
well, shooting the
and
ball, like that. That I tend to be more of the story than I don't think Purdue's going to win on the back of a Zach Edey 40-15 game. Like
no.
I think it'll be, Edey will put up 20, 25, he'll get his boards. And then the game will be won or lost based on how well is Purdue shooting, how well are they defending the perimeter, like
Defense transition and
yeah.
because again, UConn it's so interesting because they came into the tournament not as this like fast paced run and gun team. Like how Alabama likes to play their offense. It's not like there's a difference between fast paced and then just like elite transition offense team.
Yeah.
Whereas Alabama, they'll get a rebound. Sometimes they're not running, but they'll get a shot up within 8 seconds, right? It's kind of just like, that's what it means by fast. It's just you're letting the shot clock, or you don't care about it. You're just getting up a shot if you have it. And I think Purdue oftentimes doesn't play that way. It's kind of like, you might have an open shot 5 seconds into the shot clock, but it's like, well, I'm not like that open. I don't feel that confident. Let's swing it around, try to play it in low, see if we can get something else. I don't think that's going to work because UConn, like, they'll rebound. They're amazing in transition. And that's where they do their damage, in my opinion. It's just like they're so in sync and they're just
deliberate.
run and gun.
They're so deliberate about everything that they do.
It's insane. But they're still not like fast. So that's like a good thing, I guess, for Purdue. It's fascinating. It is interesting. Like, I know I'm not predicting that as the matchup we're going to see, but in reality, I kind of hope it is. I probably think it is, deep down. I just worry that everyone's kind of locking that in, that we're going to see it. But I think everyone wants to see it. I would love to see.
Well, and it's one of those things I feel like very rarely we get, because the tournament is so chaotic. It's 68 teams, single elimination. It is the most insane playoffs in any sporting event at all. And I feel like very rarely do you get two of the best teams all season playing against each other for a national title. Like, I feel like a lot of times it's
probably about 50-50, I would say, because like last year you didn't at all, really. Kansas was amazing in 2022, but North Carolina was an 8 seed for a reason. Now, they were playing fantastic basketball. They almost won, which is nuts. But, they were an 8 seed for a reason. But the year before that, you had Gonzaga undefeated versus Baylor, who was the second best 1 seed.
Yeah.
So that is exactly what we could see again. Now, that ended up being a blowout. I hope to God we wouldn't see another blowout. 2019, UVA 3 seed Texas Tech. 2018, Villanova 3 seed Michigan. 2017, UNC Gonzaga, I believe maybe were both 1 seeds. The year before, Villanova might have been a 2 seed, but they were still one of the best teams in the country.
Yep.
So, and then 2015 was 1 seed Duke, 1 seed Wisconsin. But then the year before that was 8 seed Kentucky, 7 seed UConn. So, you'll see some amazing matchups, but then you'll see some, like, how the hell did they get here matchups. But I think the ones that are kind of in the middle, where it's like amazing team versus like pretty good team, those are the ones that are less juicy.
Yeah.
Like if it was one like Alabama, Purdue, I don't know how. That's probably worst case scenario, right?
Yeah. In terms of like the public perception, because like everybody loves an underdog. So like people will root for NC State. I think, yeah, in terms of like what the public would least, what everybody would least want to see as fans, I think Alabama, Purdue would be worst case scenario for sure.
Right. And it'd be the 1 seed, 4 seed where it's like, yeah, you could argue maybe these teams were kind of like the best, but like, probably not. UConn, Purdue, you're taking the 2 best teams from this year.
Yeah.
Minus Houston, who kind of got really unlucky, which just sucks. But
Jamal Shead injury sucks ass. Injuries are the worst.
Yep.
What are you going to do?
Who knows? I mean, yeah, that is a bummer. But yeah, I would love to see UConn Purdue just to see the Godzilla versus Kong, King Kong, and Edie Zilla. So we'll have to see. You guys are, it's 2 days away by the time you guys are listening to this, pretty much. So, let's just enjoy it, and we'll be back here to recap it at the end.
Yep, absolutely. Cannot wait. If you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend, be a friend, tell a friend, like, subscribe, do all of that stuff. It's the absolute best way to help the channel. And we will be back with a recap. We'll talk we'll talk the Final Four. We'll talk the national championship. We'll go through how good our preseason predictions were versus where we ended up. Should be a really, really fun episode. So make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss that. And we will see you in the next one.